So I was going to feature my Christmas cards, but then I've got a new book arrived today. I'm quite excited about it. I'll show it in a minute. But first of all, here's a map. So here's Ludenden, where Henry Nicol was born. Oh yeah, before I show the map, I was going to show his baptism certificate. Yeah, so there it is. So there's 12th of November, that's the day of his baptism. I've showed this before. Henry, son of Samuel and Mary Nicol. And this is a abode. It says abode at the top of this column. Midgley. And this is the occupation of his father, labourer. And the date of Henry's birth, the 1st of September. So that's his baptism certificate. The way that we know that this is Henry is because in the 1841 census, Samuel and Mary are living in North Bridge Street in Halifax with all of their children except Henry, who's already married and living in Keighley with Mary Hudson, his wife. And Samuel was moving to Wakefield with Henry. So, even though his name is spelt differently here, Samuel spelt his name differently. He spelt it like that in Wakefield, but in Halifax, he spelt it with two L's. And it's obviously the same person because he's living with the same wife, with the same children. But in fact, Samuel had several children in Halifax who actually died, and then he had more children in Wakefield and named them with the same names. And they quite often did that. If a child died when he or she was very young, say in the first couple of years, for example, they would name the next child with the same name. Obviously, if it was the same sex. So Samuel and Bessie had a child named Mary Jane, for example, born in Halifax, who died, and then a couple of years after they had another girl in Wakefield and called her Mary Jane. But she was called after their mothers. So Mary was the name of Samuel's mother, and Jane was the name of Bessie's mother. So that's one reason why it was important to them to have a child with that name. So yes, baptised in Ludenden. Chapelry of Ludenden. Yeah, it was a chapel of ease for St John the Baptist in Halifax. That's why it's the chapelry of Ludenden, and not the parish of Ludenden. In the year 1815. Abode. Quality, trade or profession of the person. But it's very good that the person doing the baptising has written in the date of birth of the children as well, which is not required on the record. So yeah, so this is Ludenden here. This is Midgley. And this is Mytholmroyd. Why has that happened? So, yeah, they're in a circuit, Mytholmroyd. You can actually still... This here is the Burnley Road. And it used to be the path of a railway. So this is at the bottom of a hill here. And the road is very flat. I've been to Ludenden, you see. So what I did was I went to Halifax. And I caught the bus to Burnley, which is in Lancashire. So the bus goes down here, over the Pennines, and ends up in Lancashire. So I caught the bus to Ludenden foot. There are buses that go up the hill, but they're very infrequent. So this road here is very flat. And then there's a really steep hill here going up to Ludenden. And also, there's no train station here anymore at Ludenden foot. But there is a station at Mytholmroyd, so you can go by train to Mytholmroyd. And then if you wanted to go to Ludenden, you could just go up the hill to Midgley and then walk down there again. Oh yeah, and I'm just going to point out that this is Worley here. And so the person I think above on the register, their abode was Worley. I'll zoom out a bit now. So here's Sorby Bridge. It just says Sorby on the map, but that's Sorby Bridge. And this is Halifax here, so there's Ludenden in relation to Halifax. Says Pelham here. That's where Samuel Nicol is buried, in Pelham, and a lot of other people named Nicol. And here is Ovenden, where Samuel Nicol, Henry's father, was born. If you go a bit further up there, there's Mixenden, where Florence Taylor, Mary Ann's daughter, was born. I can't think of anything else I need to say about that. Yeah, but anyway, there was a road coming out from Halifax towards Sorby that was called Nicol Street. But they demolished most of it, and now it's called something else. But this seems to be where the Nicol clan is centred, in Sorby Bridge. Perhaps if we zoom in, it'll give it. Because Sorby is in North Yorkshire, near Thirsk. It means muddy farm or something, this BY suffix. There we are, Sorby Bridge. It's Viking. It means muddy farm. So BY, the suffix, means that's your primary settlement. So BY is primary settlement, the first farm. And Thorpe is secondary settlement. Your other farm, outlying homestead or outlying farmstead or something, that means. So this is the first settlement. I don't know of anywhere named Thorpe around Halifax, but there's a lot of places around Wakefield named Thorpe, outlying settlements. It means it's dependent on the primary settlement if a place is called Thorpe. So I can't think of anything else just at the moment to mention on this map. I'm going to move my laptop in a minute, and then my book will be in view. My new book. I can't believe I've got it already. I'm going to weigh it. In fact, it's such a heavy book. I've literally had it minutes because I decided just before I started this, I was going to go and check if there'd been any posts, because previously I'd forgotten it was Saturday and they would be posts today, because, you know, it's all very confusing around Christmas and you never know what day it is. And then I remembered, oh, it's Saturday, there might have been some posts, but I really wasn't expecting it because I only ordered it on Monday, I think. So I'll explain the book in a minute. I'm just going to look in Halifax, see if I can see anything else that I want to mention. Zoomed in a bit, because then it'll show more places on the map. Where's Halley Hill? Or Haley Hill? Might be up the Ovenden Road. Where's Northerham? It's up here somewhere. Boothtown. Might have to zoom in further. Because places that were previously villages have now been absorbed. I need to find out where the railway station is, and then I'll know where places are. A very famous local landmark in Halifax is the Gibbet. There's a saying. Oh, here's Northerham. Yeah, so there's a lot of people named Nicol living there as well. And in fact, Mary Nicol, Henry's mother, she was living. I think it was. No, she was living with some Nichols who were from Northerham, but she was in the Haley Hill area. Here we are, South Iran. So that's the place where the other Samuel Nicol was from, who was put as the father of Henry Nicol. At the I think it was the marriage record I was looking at, but that Samuel Nicol was a different person because he got married in 1800, whereas Samuel and Mary would have got married somewhere around 1815. But they're all related to each other anyway. Very difficult to untangle it all. There's not that many were living in the centre of Halifax. Samuel and Mary didn't live there for very long. It really surprised me, as I've said before, how much people moved around. I could just search for Haley Hill, couldn't I? There's a very spectacular church there. All Souls, Haley Hill. Yeah, there we are. That's a picture of the church there. It's redundant now. But anyway, that's where Mary Nicol is buried, in All Souls Haley Hill. I don't know why I couldn't find it before then. I walked up there to Haley Hill from the centre of Halifax. It's not very far from North Bridge Street at all. It's very, very close. But it's very hilly. You're just up and down hills all the time in Halifax because it's in the foothills of the Pennines. I'm going to zoom out a bit. I'm going to go and look at the church in a minute in Haley Hill. So North Bridge Street is down here somewhere. North Bridge Street is around here somewhere. I did go to visit that as well. There's no houses on it anymore though. Here it is, North Bridge. And North Bridge Street is just to the side of it. It's not giving you the names of these roads. But I do believe it's one of these. You go down and there's a car park at the bottom. And it's still a cobbled street. But there's no houses on it anymore. See, this bridge, North Bridge, was an absolutely fantastic achievement. And all the mill workers in Halifax got half a day off so that they could be present for the opening of the North Bridge. And it was decided that at a certain time the North Bridge was going to be open, but the people who worked in the factories were so excited that they broke onto the bridge twice before it was officially opened. It is a beautiful bridge, I'll say that. I've walked over it several times now. I walked over it to go to Haley Hill. Where's the church? I don't know where it is. But I'm going to guess that it's around here. Because there's a park there next to it. Oh, well, there it is. Now I've ended up in the wrong place. Oh, no, there's the entrance to the church. It's an absolutely magnificent church, built in the 19th century by some very famous architect, but I can't remember who it is. But anyway, this is where Mary Nicol is buried, in here. All Saints, Haley Hill. And in fact, she was living in houses very similar to these. Unfortunately, it's been demolished, but looking on old maps, these are very similar kinds of houses. There's a lot of, like, buildings that would have been built in brick in Wakefield. are built in stone in Halifax. Even the mills are built out of stone. There was obviously a lot of stone there. This is a mill across here, which is built in stone. It's spectacular, Halifax, because of the stone buildings. Yeah, I remember looking at this statue here. And there's the church, All Souls, Halley Hill. And you can go in the graveyard any time. But the church is only open on designated open days. And I haven't been to it, unfortunately, because of gang stalkers. But if it weren't for that, I would have done. I wasn't intending to look at this, and I don't really know why I did. How do I get out of here now? There we are. Anyway, that's enough. That's enough looking at Halifax for now. So Mary was living in a house somewhere around here. Anyway, she'll get rid of my laptop now, and there's my book. So, I heard about this book because I was looking about the history of Midgley and Ludenden online. And I found this book and I was looking for it in various places and it cost over £20. And I thought, wow, that's really expensive. And then I found it on the Hebden Bridge Local History Society at a bargain price. So like £3.65 or something. I can't believe how heavy it is. I'm going to weigh it in a minute. It's a really heavy book. So I'm going to look at that later, but I'm going to read from my book. A St. John of the Cross book. £1 kilo, 181 grams. It's phenomenally heavy. Like, I'd expect it to be a gigantic book to be weighing that much. It's incredible. I haven't even opened it yet. So, but I'm going to have a look at it later. There's a lot of people. There's a, is it Methodist chapel? It's not there anymore in Midgley. It burnt down, but the graveyard's still there. There's a lot of people called Nicol buried in the graveyard in Midgley. Chapter 32. 2 benefits derived from the negation of joy in supernatural goods. 1. Besides the advantage of being freed from these kinds of harm, the soul acquires 2 excellent benefits. The first refers to the praise and extolling of God, the second to the exaltation of the soul itself. God is exalted in the soul in 2 ways. First, the heart and willful joy are withdrawn from all that is not God and concentrated on Him alone. David intended this in the verse we quoted at the beginning of the night of this faculty. The human heart will reach high, and God will be exalted. Psalm 64:6-7. There's a footnote here that says, in fact, these psalm verses are not quoted elsewhere in this work. By lifting the heart above all things, the soul exalts God above them all. 2. And because the soul in this way concentrates only on God, God receives praise and exaltation in manifestation to His excellence and grandeur. In this elevation of joy in Him, God gives the soul testimony of who He is. This is only done when the will is empty of joy and consolation in all things. As He also declares through David, "Leave all and see that I am God." Psalm 46:10. And again David says, "In a desert way, dry and pathless, I appeared before you to see your power and glory." Psalm 63, 1-2. God is truly extolled when joy is withdrawn from all things and centred on Him, but He receives much more glory when it is removed from these more marvellous goods and applied to Him alone, since by being supernatural, they are of higher entity. To leave them behind for the sake of joy in God alone is to attribute greater glory and excellence to God than to them. The greater the quality and quantity of things one despises for the sake of another, the greater the esteem and praise one gives to that other. 3. Moreover, through withdrawing the will from these works, one exalts God in the second manner. The more the soul believes in and serves God without testimonies and signs, the more it extols God, since it believes more of him than signs and miracles can teach. 4. The second benefit, the exaltation of the soul, owes its origin to the withdrawal of the will from all apparent testimonies and signs. Because of this, the soul is exalted in purest faith, that God then infuses and augments much more abundantly. And together with this, he increases the other two theological virtues, charity and hope. As a result, the soul enjoys divine and lofty knowledge by means of the dark and naked habit of faith, and the admirable delight of love through charity, by which it rejoices in nothing else than the living God, and satisfaction in the memory by means of hope. All of this is a splendid benefit, essentially and directly required for the perfect union of the soul with God. Chapter 33. The nature and division of the sixth kind of good, that is, a possible object of joy for the will. 1. Our intention in this work is to guide the soul through spiritual goods, to divine union with God. Now that we are about to discuss this sixth kind, those very goods that are the most helpful in this matter, both the reader and I myself will have to pay particular attention. Because of their lack of knowledge, it is a common and certain occurrence with some to let spiritual things serve only for the senses, leaving the spirit empty. Hardly will anyone be found in whom sensory satisfaction does not in some way spoil a good part of what was destined for the spirit, drinking up the waters before they reach the spirit, leaving the spirit dry and empty. 2. To come to our subject then, by spiritual goods, I refer to all those that are an aid and motivating force in turning the soul to divine things and communion with God, as well as a help in God's communications to the soul. 3. According to their main headings, I divide spiritual goods into two classes, one delightful, the other painful. There's a footnote here. Here John sets aside the procedure followed with the 5 preceding kinds of goods in which he dedicated 3 chapters to each. He now so multiplies subdivisions that he allows himself to enter a forest without exit. I've lost my place now. Oh, here we are. Each of these can again be divided into 2 kinds. The delightful comprise both goods that are clearly and distinctly understood and others that do not afford clear or distinct understanding. The painful, likewise, include both those that are clear and distinct and others that are vague and obscure. 4. We can also divide these goods according to the faculties of the soul. Some, those dealing with knowledge, belong to the intellect. Others, those dealing with emotions, belong to the will. And others, those dealing with things of the imagination, belong to the memory. 5. We will discuss the painful goods afterward, because they belong to the passive night. There's a footnote here, and it says he's thinking of the subject he treats in The Dark Night, especially in the 2nd book. The discussion of the vague and indistinct delightful goods will be left for the end, since they are pertinent to the general, vague, loving knowledge in which union with God is effected. In the 2nd book, we also deferred this to the end when we listed the divisions of intellectual apprehensions. Footnote 3. Compare chapters 10, 4, 14, 6 and 14. He continues to put off his treatment of this most important topic, since the ascent was never finished One must gather what he might have said through his words on the subject in other works. Here we will treat of delightful goods that are clear and distinct. Let me just have a look at when this finishes. I've looked before, but 3:49 and I'm on 3:30. Chapter 34. I'm trying to see where the 25 minutes this video. I can't see it because it's in a light place, the counting, the seconds. The proper conduct of the will as to joy in the distinct spiritual goods communicable to the intellect and memory. 1. We would have had to cover a great deal of matter here to instruct the will about proper conduct concerning joy in the multitudinous apprehensions of the intellect and memory, if we had not amply discussed these apprehensions in the second and third book. Since we indicated there the conduct suitable for these two faculties in this kind of apprehension, there is no necessity for repetition here. The conduct of the will should be the same in their regard. It is sufficient to remark that wherever it says there that these faculties should be emptied of certain apprehensions, it also means that the will should be emptied of joy in them. The conduct required of the memory and intellect concerning these apprehensions is also necessary for the will, since the intellect and other faculties cannot admit or deny anything without the intervention of the will. The same doctrine that serves for one faculty will evidently apply to the others also. 2. In those sections the reader will find what is required in this matter. For the soul will fall into those kinds of harm if it is ignorant of how to direct to God its joy in these apprehensions. Chapter 35. Delightful spiritual goods, a division. Let me just see where I'm going to end. Okay. 1. All goods giving distinct joy to the will can be reduced to 4 kinds: motivating, provocative, directive, and perfective. We will discuss them in due order, beginning with motivating goods: statues, paintings of saints, oratories, and ceremonies. 2. There can be considerable vain joy in relation to statues and paintings, although they are vital to the divine worship and necessary to move the will to devotion, as the approbation and use of our Holy Mother, the Church, demonstrates. We should always take advantage of them in order to be awakened from our lukewarmness. Many rejoice more in the painting and ornamentation than in the object represented. 3. The Church established the use of images for 2 principal reasons: the reference given to the saints through them, and both in the motivation of the will and the awakening of devotion to the saints by their means. Insofar as they serve this purpose, their use is profitable and necessary. We should consequently choose those images that are more lifelike and move the will more to devotion. Our concentration should be centred on this devotion more than on the elaborateness of the workmanship and its ornamentation. There are, as I say, some people who pay more attention to the workmanship and value of the statue than to the object represented, and the interior devotion which they should direct spiritually toward the invisible saints in immediate forgetfulness of the statue, since the purpose of the statue is to give information, is so taken up with the exterior artistry and ornamentation that the senses receive satisfaction and delight. They both love the joy of the will. Hang on a minute. I've read that wrong. Then both the love and joy of the will dwell on that satisfaction. This is a total obstacle to authentic spirituality, which demands annihilation of the affections in all particular things. 4. Such an attitude is obvious in the abominable custom some have in these times of ours. without any abhorrence of vain worldly fashions. They adorn statues with the jewellery conceited people in the course of time invent to satisfy themselves with their pastimes and vanities. And they clothe the statues in garments that would be reprehensible if worn by themselves, a practice that was and still is abhorrent to the saints represented by the statues. In company with the devil, they strive to canonise their vanities, not without serious offence to the saints. By this practice, the authentic and sincere devotion of the soul, which in itself uproots and rejects every vanity and trace of it, is reduced to little more than doll dressing. Some use the statues for nothing more than idols upon which they centre their joy. You will see some who never tire of adding statue on statue to their collection, or insist that the statue be of a particular kind and craftsmanship, and placed in a certain niche and in a special way. Also, these statues will give delight to the senses. As for devotion of heart, there is very little. They are as attached as Micah and Laban were to their idols, for Micah left his house shouting because they were stolen, and Laban, after a long journey and being enraged, turned over all of Jacob's household and furnishings in search for them. Judges 18, 23-24, Genesis 31, 23-35. 5. People who are truly devout direct their devotion mainly to the invisible object represented, have little need for many images, and use those that are conformed more to divine traits than to human ones. They bring these images, and themselves through them, into conformity with the fashion and condition of the other world, not with this one. They do this so worldly images will not stir their appetite, and so they will not even be reminded of the world, as they would in having before their eyes any object apparently a part of this world. Their heart is not attached to these goods, and if these are taken away, their grief is slight. They seek the living image of Christ crucified within themselves, and thereby they are pleased rather to have everything taken from them and to be left with nothing. Even when the motives and means that bring the soul closer to God are taken from them, they remain calm. People are more perfect when they remain tranquil and joyous in the privation of these motives than when they possess them with desire and attachment. It is good to be pleased with images that help the soul toward deeper devotion. Individuals should not always choose the image that they find most devotional. Individuals should always choose the image that they find most devotional. Yet there is no perfection in being so attached to those one possesses as to become sad if they are taken away. 6. Individuals should be certain that the more they are attached with a possessive spirit to the image or motive, the less will their prayer and devotion ascend to God. Indeed, since some statues are truer likenesses than others and excite more devotion, it is appropriate to be attached more to some than to others. But not with that attachment and possessiveness I mentioned, for to engulf the senses in the joy of the means would expend the good that the spirit should gain by soaring from the image to God, in immediate forgetfulness of this thing or that. These means, which should be an aid in one's flight to God, now become through this imperfection a hindrance, and no less so than in the case of attachment or possessiveness relative to any other object. 7. Although on this subject of statues, you may have some objection caused by lack of a clear understanding of the nakedness and spiritual poverty demanded for perfection, at least you will not be able to defend through your objections the imperfection commonly found in the use of rosaries. You will hardly meet anyone who does not have some weakness in this matter. They want the rosary to be made in one style rather than another, or that it be of this colour, or that metal rather than another, or of this or that particular design. One rosary is no more influential with God than is another. His answer to the rosary prayer is not dependent on the kind of rosary used. The prayer he hears is that of a simple and pure heart that is concerned only about pleasing God and does not bother about the kind of rosary used, unless in regard to indulgences. 8. Our vain covetousness is such that it clings to everything. It is like the wood borer that gnaws at what is sound and performs its task in both good and bad objects. What else is your motive in carrying around an over-decorated rosary with the desire that it be this kind rather than another, and in wanting to choose this statue instead of that other, if not the joy you find in the instrument? And in your concern about their preciousness and artistry, you neglect to consider their faculty for awakening divine love in you. Were you to employ your appetite and joy only in the love of God, you would be indifferent as to this one or that. It is pitiful to see how attached some persons are to the style and craftsmanship of these instruments, and motives as well as to their elaborateness, and to the vain satisfaction that is to be gotten from them. You will never see such persons satisfied. They are always setting aside one thing for another, and forgetting spiritual devotion because of these visible means. Their attachment and possessive spirit is no different with these religious articles than it is with temporal furnishings. The harm done through such an attitude is by no means slight. Chapter 36 continues with the discussion of images, the ignorance of some in their use of them. 1. Much could be said about the ignorance of many in their use of images. Their foolishness reaches such a point that they trust more in one statue than in another, and think that God will answer them more readily through it. Even when both statues represent the same person, such as those of our Lord or our Blessed Lady. At the bottom of this idea is their greater attachment to the craftsmanship of one over that of the other. Such an attitude entails gross ignorance about communion with God and the worship and honour due him. He looks only on the faith and purity of the prayerful heart. If God sometimes bestows more favours through one statue than through another, he does not do so because of its greater ability to produce this effect, even though there may be a notable difference in craftsmanship, but because the devotion of individuals is awakened more by means of one statue than the other. Were people to have equal devotion in the presence of both, or even this same devotion without the aid of either statue, God would grant them the same favours. 2. God does not work miracles and grant favours by means of some statues, so that these statues may be held in higher esteem than others, but so he may awaken the dormant devotion and affection of the faithful through his wonderful works. Since, consequently, through the instrumentality of a certain statue, devotion is enkindled and prayer prolonged, both means by which God hears and grants one's petitions. God continues to bestow favours and work miracles through that same statue. God certainly does not work miracles because of the image, which in itself is no more than a painting, but he does so because of the faith and devotion toward the saint represented. Thus, if you had equal devotion to and faith in Our Lady before two different images of her, and even without them, as we said, you will receive the same favours. Experience even teaches that if God grants some favours and works miracles, he does so through some statues that are not very well carved or carefully painted, or that poorly represent the intended saint, so the faithful will not attribute any of these wonders to the statue or painting. There's a footnote here. The majority of people in 16th century Spain were illiterate. Paintings, statues and holy pictures served to remind them of both the content of their faith and the lives of the saints, and to awaken their devotion. The people easily grew attached to these means, often becoming superstitious about them, thinking that an image would assure them of a good harvest or bring about the cure of some illness. 3. Our Lord frequently bestows these favours by means of images situated in remote and solitary places. The reason for this is that the effort required in journeying to these places makes the affection increase and the act of prayer more intense. Another motive is that a person may withdraw from people and noise in order to pray, as our Lord did. Matthew 14:23, Luke 6:12. Whoever makes a pilgrimage, therefore, does well to make it alone. Even if this must be done at an unusual time, I would never advise going along with a large crowd, because one ordinarily returns more distracted than before. Many who go on pilgrimage do so more for the sake of recreation than devotion. Where there is devotion and faith, any image will be sufficient, but if they are lacking, none will suffice. Our Lord was indeed a living image during his sojourn in the world. Nevertheless, those who were faithless received no spiritual gain, even though they frequently went about with him and beheld his wondrous works. This is why he did not perform many mighty works in his own country, as the evangelists declare. Matthew 13:58, Mark 6:5-6. I was going to say, first of all, before it said it in this footnote, I was going to say that images and statues and such, so maligned by many Protestants, were essential for teaching faith to illiterate people. There couldn't have been any Reformation before the invention of the printing press. I've said this lots of times, but it's such a myth that the Catholic Church withheld the Bible from people. They had no means of giving the Bible to people the way it was possible after the invention of the printing press. Protestant faith was never possible before the printing press because books were so expensive. And this is a fact that's so obvious. I can't... I don't know why it isn't obvious. I mean, it's so obvious to me. I don't know why it isn't obvious. And also, the second thing I was going to say, in relation to him saying that some people are regarding some statues as better or more important than others, in order to bring about whatever it is that they're hoping for from their prayers, that one statue is going to be more efficacious than another because of its craftsmanship or something like that. And it made me think today of the way that the written word is regarded as being more authoritative than the spoken word. I mean, I don't know if it is today, but it certainly was when I was growing up. But there's not so much printed matter now as there was, because everything's in video and on the internet and so forth. But certainly, when I was growing up, the written word was considered, like without it being overtly stated, it was implicitly considered more authoritative than the spoken word, which also wouldn't really have been very possible for most people before the printing press. And so certain means of verbal communication are regarded as more authoritative than others, in the same way that people were viewing some of these statues as being better in a spiritual sense than others, even if that belief was based only on the workmanship and not on the person or thing being represented. 4. I would also like to mention here some supernatural effects that certain images occasionally cause in particular individuals. God gives some images a special spiritual influence on souls, so the representations and the devotions these cause remain fixed in the mind as though they were present. When a person suddenly recalls the image, it will exercise the same spiritual influence it did when seen, sometimes less and occasionally even more. But that person will not receive the same spiritual influence from another image, even if it is one of more perfect craftsmanship. 5. Many also experience more devotion through statues of one kind of workmanship than another. In some people, this devotion will be caused by no more than a natural liking and attachment, just as some will like the face of one person more than that of another, and become more attached to it naturally. They will preserve it more readily in their imagination because they are naturally inclined to that type of form and figure, even though the face itself may not be as beautiful as those of others. Thus some people think that the attachment they have to a certain image is devotion, when in reality it is perhaps no more than a natural attachment and preference. Occasionally, when looking at an image, they see it move and make signs and gestures, or they hear words and instructions. There's a footnote here. John himself once took from the monastery a painting of Christ carrying his cross and placed it in the church so more people would venerate it. Praying before it afterward, he heard the Lord speak to him. Fray John, ask me what you will, for I will grant it in return for this service you have rendered me. John's answer was, Lord, I desire trials to suffer for you, and to be despised and considered unimportant. This painting may still be seen in Segovia. Yeah, so the reason that we know about that incident was because he told it to his brother Francis, his blood brother, I mean, and he reported it. Where's the footnote now? Right, so carrying on with the text. Although these signs and the supernatural effects produced by the images are authentic and good, destined by God either to increase devotion or to give the soul, because of its weakness, some support against distractions, the devil frequently produces them in order to cause deception and harm. We will expound the doctrine regarding all this in the following chapter. And that's the end of that chapter. That's where I'm ending today. I've been saying how heavy this book is. It's not an enormous book. How many pages are in it? 346. I guess that's more than I thought, but even so, not massive. It's so heavy. Feels like a book of about 1,000 pages. There's the price on it. It was in fact more than that. Everywhere, apart from with the Hebden Bridge Local History Society. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.